This episode, we are going to be exploring our true authentic self and why it is important to live in our truth and our authentic in our own authentic ways. So I remember a couple of years ago when the conversation around vaccinations started, and we were, I'm in the health and social care um, field, and we were told that we had to be vaccinated if we were to carry on working, and therefore we didn't have a choice. Now, I am not going to talk about whether vaccinations are right or wrong. That's not what I'm here for. What I'm going to talk about is understanding your authentic self. There are many people who, for their own reasons, chose to have vaccinations, and then there are other people, for their own reasons again, chose not to have vaccinations. For me, the matter that I want to bring out is that people who chose not to have the vaccinations for whatever reasons probably had a chance to think about themselves, and they were probably truly connected to their truth, to their own truth and the essence of who they are. For many of us, it was a worry about probably finances. Am I going to lose my job? Can I afford to live without my job? And some of us, the acceptance to be vaccinated was off the back of becoming unemployed and not being able to support our families. And this is what brings me to the conversation around our authentic selves. You see, when you understand who you are, you're not going to make decisions based on external hardships or influences. Your decisions are going to be based on your intuition and your gut intuition telling you, because you know who you are, you're able to make decisions that are in your best interest. Now, a lot of you know that I have been talking about religion for a long time, because religion, like any other institutions, when you look at education, when you look at governments, have been the drivers of truth in society for generations and generations. And therefore, we have, as human beings, learned to to have religion as religion and other institutions as our basic identifiers in life. They tell us who we are. The religious stories and education will tell us who we are, where we come from, where we are going to. They will explain and put meaning to life. Now, with the coming of technology, a lot of the things that we knew as truth are now beginning to show themselves that they may not necessarily be the only truth or the only way to do things, and that actually some of them are not even truth at all. The problem with society is that information has not come equally to everyone. For example, we have situations in underdeveloped countries where they still don't believe that dinosaurs existed, and they're driven by the religious aspects of in their understanding, they're driven by what they have learned through their religions. There are people who do not believe modern science and what it has come up with. But then at the same time, we have also not been exposed to a lot of the science and the developments that's happening around the world. For example, we now have robotic machines that can be connected. For example, a robotic limb that can be connected to my body. It will read my thoughts and work in turn with my thoughts. If I'm wanting to move my hand to the left or to the right, it will move to the left or right because it has understood my thoughts. Now, that is very complex, or it looks like it's very complex technological advances. But we have to understand that there have been people who have been championing these fields of science. And for these people, like Elon Musk, I'll give an example, they have understood that there's more to humanity than what we have been told from institutions and historical ways of understanding who we are. And because of that, it is important for us to quickly adjust and start to look at evidence. Because if we do not understand who we are going to be driven around from one place to another. And sometimes even the driving forces do not know where we're going. And that's the only reason why you're finding wars that are endless, and a lot of things that we would consider bizarre at this stage that are happening in all over the globe. There's endless fights. There doesn't seem to be solutions to it. We're having institutions where sometimes or many times the truth is not prevailing in those institutions. We're having religious leaders doing things that are not expected of them. And I don't know if it's technology that's exposing the divergence in truth, or this has always been the case, but technology is now exposing us to the magnitude of it. Regardless of what it is, we still are left with a vacuum that doesn't explain who we are as humans. And I have people who tend to ask me that, Eva, with your conversations, are you trying to say that maybe there's no God, maybe there are certain things that you do not subscribe to? I never want to talk about things that I subscribe or do not subscribe to, because I am also learning. I have recently decided that I'm going to read a lot. I'm going to understand who I am so that I can make better decisions for myself, so that I'm not swayed by what others have to say out there. But in order for us to achieve that, in order for people to understand self, they have to be willing to strip themselves of what they have known as truth. We have to strip the cultures away. We have to strip the religions away, and perhaps come back to it with a better understanding of who we are. I think that will be more authentic and truthful to ourselves and the decisions that we make. Now, in the absence of truth, there is a lot of wavering for how we should go forward as a human race. The only way and the only truth that I now understand to be truth is what I believe for myself to be true. And that requires for me to spend more time with myself than with anything else. Now, as much as technology is good, technology also has its limitations. You can spend endless hours on social media consuming information, and I am guilty of that as well. I will be consuming lots of information, and I have to consciously say to myself, you need to stop, because this is no longer serving you. You are now looking at things that are probably not helpful for your personal growth. But social media has controlled many of us, parents and children and grandparents. Everyone is controlled by social media to a very large extent, and that's for people who have not yet discovered the importance of self and understanding self. Now, the more time you spend on social media, listening to things like the latest war, and it's endless, and the wars are actually repetitive. Russia against America, America against Russia. The president in this African country has been overtaken by a coup. You can almost copy and paste all the news there is to talk about. It is a repetition, an endless repetition that we keep feeding ourselves with, at the expense of knowing self and being able to determine for ourselves what we want to see in our lives. So I would like to encourage people to start to start a journey where they understand who they are as human beings, what they want for themselves. It is beautiful way of living when you know what you want for yourself, and people cannot decide for you what you should be. So in my case, the restrictions around the vaccinations that I took, perhaps if I had had the understanding that I have today, I may have come to the same conclusion, but it would have been informed, and it would have been serving who I believe I am today. So in in my conversation today, I want to encourage people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to understand who you are. Nobody's going to do that for you. And for you to allow a man of God or whoever it is that has authority over your life to determine who you need to be or who you want to be for the rest of your life is totally unfair to yourself and to the generations to come. I remember, as I'm ending, I remember an incident or in my early childhood where someone said, "Oh, I was praying to God and God told me that this is what is going to become of you." Now, I got so frightened because it wasn't anything positive that came out of that person's mouth. And so many years later, I was reflecting on it and realized that actually none of the things that that person said to me came to pass. It was just a projection of who they thought I was. It was their own projection of who they thought I was. And all the things they believed that was going to happen to me growing up, none of it happened. And yet I lived for so many years in fear of what that person had spoken into my life. And it was absolute garbage and rubbish. But I couldn't, for being a younger child, I couldn't separate the two. And this is where the role of religion, and that's why I am very, very much um, supportive of people questioning what they're being told, even by their religious leaders or those people that appear important in their lives. People can take influence over you when you don't know who you are. And those behaviors are perpetuated and carried forward within our own societies today. We have religious people coming in and making assumptions on other people's lives, telling them what they have heard from God. And my question is, if you can hear from God, why can't I hear from God? What is limiting, and what is what is limiting the ability for God to speak to me too and tell me about me than using an external person who has no idea about my life? I stopped subscribing to information like that because it breaks people and it stops people from achieving their higher knowledge of their higher selves. You're always going to be looking up to that one person to tell you what has God said, what has God said next. And all they're doing is telling you what they think needs to be happening. It's telling you what they think of you, what they have perceived of you, of your situation. Sometimes we even give off cues for ourselves, and somebody can see you're desperate, you're scared, and play onto that to the best of their knowledge, such that you're always dependent on others and never able to achieve your higher self. But when you start to make that journey, when you start to take that confidence to understand who you are, life changes. Your decisions are solid. Nobody can influence you and drive you in ways that are not for you. With that, I just want to thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.